When Glenn Corbitt contacted me, I was absolutely delighted. Just a personal story, it was actually Charlie Weaver who brought me here to Gettysburg from West Virginia. My father was a fan. We came here and the rest is history. Then that developed my love of this battlefield. What can I say about Glenn? The foremost historian on Cliff Arquette. He is a wax figure aficionado. He is also a professor in New York. We could not be more humbled and thrilled to have him here. We chose this building, for those of you who did not know, Charlie Weaver and Cliff Arquette owned this building and had the museum here. We felt it would be fitting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Glenn Corbitt.
Thank you. So, thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate it. I think we'll have some fun this afternoon. We've got about 100 slides to go through, so we'll move quickly though. And so I think you'll find it interesting. So a little bit about myself, a little bit more than Christina mentioned. So I'm from Bergen County, New Jersey, north end of the state. My wife and I live in Waldwick, town of Waldwick, above Paramus. I come to this because of the wax issue here, the wax figures and things. I've had an interest in that. But going further back, my mom and dad played a role, particularly my father. He was very interested in the cavalry, U.S. cavalry, and we had quite a collection in our house. He was a member of a group called the Company of Military Historians, and we came to Gettysburg over the years for events with that group. Matter of fact, one of his friends owned a ice cream place down on 20-Town Road. It's now called Grumpy's Pizza. Okay, that used to be an ice cream stand, and behind it was a cavalry museum, a small building there. So it was sort of fell into line with Gettysburg and sort of this whole thing of small museums around town, basically. So I've been immersed in that for quite a bit of time, and for some reason I have a fascination about wax figures and wax museums. I hope to do a book on it one day. And they play a role with this building and some other things going on in Gettysburg that we're going to talk about today. So, so what do I do? Normally like this fellow right here is a longtime friend. He was the chief of the Jersey City Fire Department. He was head of the National Fire Academy down in Emmitsburg. He lives in G-Burg now. And so I'm a fire guy. I teach fire science, emergency management, things like that at John Jay College in New York. So that's my background with that. So again, without further ado, let's get into it here. Everybody probably remembers Charlie from the left photograph, which was him on Hollywood Squares. He had the bottom square in the bottom left corner. He was there pretty much for the last part of his life, basically, until he passed away. So he was well known for that. So let's see if this is going to work. I have if not, I might go offline and see if we can hear this.
Hello, I'm David Arquette, grandson of Cliff Arquette, also known as Charlie Weaver in the entertainment business. This is a message for Glenn Corbitt and everyone that he is sharing this lecture on Cliff Arquette with. This is a lecture on Cliff Arquette in Gettysburg. Cliff had a Civil War museum there. He was a Civil War historian and really dedicated his life, the later part of his life, to that. He loved it. He loved being a historian. He loved Gettysburg. There's a rumor that he even helped petition for the Gettysburg battlefield to be designated a national monument because there was rumors that they were going to try to build something on it. I don't know if that's true, but I always remembered hearing that. I only met him once when I was about 5 years old, but I got to know him through his work on mainly on the Hollywood Squares. There was a story that you know, he was big in radio early in his career at NBC and later CBS. But he was he used to do his character Charlie Weaver on the radio. And when radio died and television took over, he was semi-retired. The story goes that he was sitting back having a scotch, and he was watching the original Tonight Show with Jack Parr. And Jack Parr said, whatever happened to Charlie Weaver? He spit out his scotch. Next day he called him up and said, I'm right here. Love to come on your show. And he came on his show and became a regular guest. He started playing this old man character that would write letters home to Mama to the fictional town of Mount Ida. Although there is a town called Mount Ida in Arkansas, and for years they had a Charlie Weaver parade, apparently. And he had visited that once in a little parade car that I have since got. As you can see behind me, this is a self-portrait of him as a younger man. But it was funny, he played this older character and then ended up becoming an old man playing the same character. So he grew into his character, Charlie Weaver. This is another self-portrait of him. He was a huge fan of Norman Rockwell, so he did this in that style. He's a wonderful artist. As you see, he's painting the soldiers, the wooden soldiers that would appear in the museum. Different Civil War uniforms. Here's to who it may concern, and I guess it's a discharge letter that appeared at the museum as well for a soldier being discharged. Let's see the date there. But this also appeared at the museum. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a picture of Abraham Lincoln. And here are a couple paintings that he did of the soldiers that appeared at the museum. He was particularly fond of their uniforms. He had a bunch of those wooden statues that he would display of all the different uniforms and all the different, people that interacted with them. Everyone from the French to the trackers and different stuff. I remember seeing them as a kid and being fascinated. This is a wonderful little painting he did of a caboose in this little house that says Mount Ida. If you look closely, little Charlie Weaver character is seen there reading a newspaper. This was a painting that I'd grown up with, and I always wondered who it was, and I finally found out that it was his gardener. He was really good friends with his gardener. This is an interesting little piece that he had. It's like an Oscar, like an Academy Award, but it's a woman. It says, Award of Merit presented for the outstanding Hollywood production of 1942. Film I had never seen, but it said Best Direction, Cliff Arquette, Best Film Editing. He won all Best Performance, Cliff Arquette. He won all the awards. And then that just shows his sense of humor. This is a painting of his favorite pit boss. I'd say in Las Vegas or something. And that's about it. This is an old lamp from there as well. And that's my father, Louis Arquette, Cliff's son. It's a puzzle that we put together, and it's him as Isaac Newton for a Fig Newton ad campaign. It's not really part of it, but once again, his self-portrait. But I just want to thank you again, Glenn. I know he'd get a real kick out of this, and I appreciate it. I'd love to see your lecture at some point, if it's posted online or something. So thank you, and thank you from the whole Arquette family. We appreciate it.
Yeah, he was very young when his grandfather passed away.
Hello.
Just a little bit here. He was a young man, a young boy actually, when he passed away. Two of his siblings, we'll see here in a little while, actually were here in the museum with Cliff Arquette. And they, of course, it's Rosanna Arquette and Richmond Arquette. Those are the brother and sister. They probably would remember, but the only Arquette I was able to connect with was David. So a little bit of background about Cliff. He was born on December 28, 1905. He died in September 74. His parents were both vaudevillians in Toledo, Ohio. Charlie was, and by the way, I'm going to keep switching back to Charlie Cliff. As far as for this program, they're both the same person, so it's easier to talk about Charlie. Cliff Arquette was married, first marriage is to Mildred from 33 to 1940. That would have been David Arquette's grandmother, okay? So they only had one child, who he mentioned, Lewis, also was known as Mike. And Mike actually worked here, you'll see in this building. He was also married to Darlene. We'll see her picture in a little while. And again, I mentioned Michael Lewis. They interchange names very often. But he is the grandfather of Rosanna, Patricia, Richmond, Alexis, and David Arquette. Alexis passed away a few years ago. His early years, he was fascinated with the Civil War as a child. That's probably why he ended up here to some extent, because he really was interested in the Civil War. Most notably that one of his grandfather was served in the war for a very short period of time. There's one of those Finding Your Roots program with Patricia Arquette, and they talk about him being in the Civil War for like a 100-day man. They were in service for 100 days, and that was it. But apparently he brought his rifle home and some things, and so that sort of stirred up Cliff's interest. Cliff, as a child, won a vaudeville performance act, basically. He won a contest. He created his own. I mean, one of the things we're going to learn today, this guy was incredibly talented for so many ways. I mean, he had his hands in everything. He's a musician as well. He played the piano. He created his own band called the Purple Derbies. Why? Because there was a store that had a stack of these, and they were like practically giving them away. So of course, sells the Purple Derbies, and that was it. He played at Euclid Beach in Cleveland, which was a big amusement park at the time. That photo, I'm just going to go back here. This is the earliest photo I can find of him. And the only reason I know about certain things is because it's on the back. This was taken in 1936. So, you know, he's a young man now, rising up. This photo was taken in Chicago, where he spent a lot of time there. But the reason I know some of these things is on the back there is that he created marionettes, wood carvings, and I know that he was a cartoon illustrator as well. And in the case over here, I have that image. I was able to get his sketchbook, if you want to call it that, for the Mount Ida fictitious characters and stuff. So I picked this one, obviously, because he's the grandfather of Civil War Confederate soldier, basically. He actually was a voice for Walt Disney's cartoons. He made a whole bunch of noises, apparently. He was this incredible talent. And of course, he started off with, which most people know him for today, was a comedian. That's kind of why we know him today. And that's where his beginnings started there. To give you some examples, he moves to California in 26. He joins this band, the Hank Halstead Band, basically as a musician. He's still doing his vaudeville at that point as a performer for this Fanchon and Marco, a group called the Prologues in California in 26. The Gilmore Circus in the 30s, and then by that point, by 34, he actually had his own program that he went on the road with across there. And here's a couple images there. The one with the Gilmore on the side there with the poster and stuff. But you can figure out at this point already, he does all sorts of impersonations of different kinds of people, young, old. men and women. So here's one of his earliest photos as a woman. He's in Chicago, I believe in the 30s. There's one story about him being on 13 different radio programs, and that he used the Chicago River as a way to go back and forth between all the studios. I couldn't find that in that period of time from newspapers.com, which is, of course, as we know, is an incredible resource. He had a bunch of radio programs in Los Angeles. Specifically, he was on Fibber McGee and Molly. He was the Old Timer. He was in the Rudy Valley Show. He was with Fred Astaire on another program. So he really had a lot. But the other thing I want to point out to you is you see this picture over here on the right. It's kind of cut off a little bit. On the Rudy Valley Show, you see the beginnings of Charlie Weaver here. Okay, he's playing this old guy, and so this is again from 1939. Slap Happy, Grandpappy. Okay, so you see where this is coming from. He was a lead on a radio program called Avalon Time, and also on this program called the Glamour Manor in the mid-40s. This is where he really starts to really take off. Here's another old man character he's playing as well. So again, this is the reason I showed you all this is because it kind of makes sense. Here he is as Mrs. Wilson in the Glamour Manor. Okay, and then again it's a radio program. Now we, as David Arquette mentioned, maybe I'll push this up just a little bit to consolidate the screen a little here. This might work there. Okay. He talked about sort of radio dying off and TV. So, there's a lot of folks, sorry I'm talking to one side here, there's a lot of folks, as you know, that were on radio that, or even people in early movies, silent films, they never were able to get into talkies, basically. The same thing with radio. A lot of people couldn't make the transition from radio to TV, but he jumped on it right away. And so he ends up where the first reference I could find to Charlie Weaver actually was on a TV program called Dave Willock's Dr. Hobby on October 3rd, 1940. That's the first mention of Charlie Weaver with that name, okay? It may have been earlier, but I can't prove it one way or the other, but that's probably where it was. Subsequently, he came on a program called Dave and Charlie, in which they were in the fictitious town of Mount Ida, which, as David Arquette mentioned, Arkansas claimed it, but Ohio did as well. It was a town that they termed Mount Ida in Ohio, and that's where he was from. So that might, who knows exactly which one he got the idea to create it, but that's where it came from. And so it was a kind of funky program on television, early TV, in which crazy things would happen. Like it was next to the railroad track, so every time the railroad train came, the whole building shaking, the paintings would go around and stuff. So it was quite the thing. He then moved on to the Dennis Day show between 52 and 54, and again, he played a variety of characters here. By the way, the photographs that I'm showing you, most of them are in my collection. Some, as I know, are from Adams County Historical and some other places. There are some from newspapers.com, which is the only image I could find of, and they're not the best, but they'll have to suffice for our program today. Guess who he gets the idea to create the wooden figures from? He's already creating wood objects, right? He's already doing marionettes, he's already carving wood and stuff like that. He goes to Jack Webb's house and Jack Webb says, oh, look at my little soldiers here. So he takes some of them home. Again, he's living in Los Angeles. And he said, you know what, I'm going to try it because I'm really good at wood carving. Let me try to make some of these myself. And that's the beginnings of what ended up here, basically, was, of all people, Jack Webb of Dragnet and fame, right? In 53. Oh, he was on Dragnet itself. That's how I guess they came together, as he's on the actual Dragnet program. Cliff's house in Sherman Oaks. There's his second wife, Darlene. They eventually did get divorced and things, but the important thing about this is probably, see if my brand new clicker here. Take a look. This is, again, newspapers.com, not very good, but can you see, that's a fireplace. Guess what's above the fireplace? The musket. It's probably the Civil War musket that he was so fascinated with. The whole thing about this is that the house is all decorated in Pennsylvania Dutch decor, okay? That tells you a lot why he loved it here. He lived in Los Angeles, but he loved right where we are right now. So that was this is again, in Sherman Oaks, California. He was an honorary mayor of the town. the whole bit. And so he really likes it here. He really does like to come here. He ends up on another program in 55. David Willock becomes a lifelong friend of his. David Willock, we know at the end, when Charlie passes away, we end up knowing actually where Charlie had another woman that was basically his girlfriend, I imagine, living out there in California. And she may have played a role in why I'm here today talking about it. I'll explain a little bit later. But anyway, he's on with David Willock. They loved like hobby shop and hobbies and carving and wood and metal and things. David Willock owned his own studio in LA where they would both work there together, and then they end up filming in there. And of course, Charlie would be the crazy guy who gets his tie caught in the, in the saw, or, and things. There's a few videos on YouTube that show him in this program where they're making a screen window, basically. It's this point where he actually does, in fact, create what he said were his 5 little men. By the time when he comes here, actually there's 57 of them completed when he comes here. Oh, one other thing too, we're going to jump around a little bit because there's so much that happens basically between 1959 and 1963, so it's going to get a little confusing because there's other players I need to bring in here and explain how they all connect. So I might be going back and forth a little bit here, just so you're aware of that. He has his own program from 59 to 60. I'm assuming it's from New York because he's here in 59, okay? He's actually here a little bit earlier, but he's here in 59. It's his own Charlie Weaver's Hobby Lobby program, and that's a press photo from that. He gets a star in Hollywood for his radio work in February 1960. Now, I put this up purposely this way. You would think the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce from February 1960 to October 2024 would be able to at least put a picture up on there. It's coming soon. That's as old as I am, 64 years ago, okay? So it's like, I purposely put that. There's a nice LA Times one with the picture, but I thought, isn't it appropriate that they can't even didn't recognize him for TV, he's recognized for radio, okay? Okay, so what's happening now? The Civil War Centennial is coming up in 63. Charlie's in town and basically in 59. And I use these two photos for what reason? My father took both of these pictures for the Bergen Record, okay? He flew out here for that weekend, or that July 1st through 3rd, took the photographs, and went back and processed them. They did, back in those days, as you remember, a lot of the newspapers had these inserts on Sunday where they have a series of photos and things like that. That's what this was all about. And so there's this shot of Pickett's charge that he took, I guess July 3rd, 1963. And include this other fellow over here. That's my cousin, okay, from Rutherford, New Jersey, all right? That's my other cousin. He's from Toms River, New Jersey now. He's sitting over here. He'll be coming in the program later on as well. But I include my cousin here for one reason. Number one, my father was there, and of course his nephew's there, so he took his picture and put it in the record. But I want to point out he's riding a bike. He rode his bicycle all the way from Rutherford to Gettysburg, okay? As a Boy Scout, as an Eagle Scout. That was a whole different time back then, where young people were really into history, right? That this was incredible that he would ride his bike all the way here. He ended up being an usher at the Eternal Light. Apparently, I guess maybe it was a scout thing, and they helped when they had some of the ceremonies up there during the Centennial. But I wanted to show you that, and I thought, why not use my dad's picture? He worked for the Record, which is now unfortunately a Gannett newspaper. They've kind of disassembled parts of it, but the Record is probably most famous now, modern times. They're the photographer who took the 3 firefighters in 9/11 raising the flag. That's a Record photograph, actually. So that's where that came from. So Cliff says, I'm going to retire. I'm tired. I've been on radio. I've been on a bunch of TV. I'm going to go to California. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to carve my soldiers. I'm going to do whatever. And you heard David Arquette tell the story about on the Jack Paar. Jack Paar was the originator of The Tonight Show. Says, whatever happened to Charlie Weaver? And Charlie immediately telegrams him, I'm here. Want me to come out? So he goes from LA to New York, right? Now, if you're going to live in New York, you're going to perform in New York, you got to probably live in New York. Even 63 or 59, it's not the easiest getting back and forth 2 or 3 times a week, right, on the plane. So this is, I'm thinking in Charlie Cliff Arquette's mind, he's thinking, this is like the perfect opportunity for me to go to Gettysburg. I love Pennsylvania Dutch, I love all about the Civil War, I love all that. I'm gonna get a house in Gettysburg, and that's kind of what happens here. They put it in the newspaper, and you'll notice in this article, there's no mention of a museum. All it is he's coming to town, that's all it is, there's no mention of a museum here at all, okay? And so they're excited because there's this famous guy. I mean, listen, we're all old enough, remember, there were like, in New York City, there were what, 9 TV stations, something like that, right? That was it. I mean, in smaller towns, there's maybe 5 TV stations, that was it. There's no cable, there's no internet, there's no nothing. This guy is on TV all the time now, at least 2 times a week, right? And so he's well known at this point. He's on every television around. You heard David mention Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell is the one who suggested Charlie go here specifically to Gettysburg. And so there's a Christmas card that Norman Rockwell did. You can't read, it's in the case over here. It actually, you can't read it here well, but it's Cliff Arquette's printed name in this Norman Rockwell Christmas card. So apparently they were connected. I would imagine because of the illustration side of things. Charlie was in a group of cartoonists and other kind of illustrators. I'm sure that's how they must have met at some point. Oops. Sorry about that. Oh, here's your photo. Look for nudity here. Who was looking for nudity here? Okay. Right. We're going to talk about the tour here in a minute. Hugh Downs of Concentration Television Program, right? That guy. He's one of the people in the Gettysburg tour, right? And so they connected in New York at NBC on the Jack Paar show because he was, I'm talking about Hugh Downs, was the sort of MC for that program. And Charlie did say years later, I picked radio people because I knew they had good voices and can speak well. That's what he picked, and he just specifically did that for the tour here. So yeah, there's my semi-nude picture. Now what they were doing, I don't know, but anyways, it's funny. But here's a key, here's a key. This is why I think this is important in this talk, is that you got the centennial coming up in '63. You got this guy twice a week talking about the Civil War and bringing his wooden figures onto the program. So you see how people across America are learning about Gettysburg particularly. You know, I mean, they knew about it, but this is really connecting to them. And of course, he ends up being involved in several different things in Gettysburg here. He's moved here. We're going to talk about his museum in a minute. But he also, of course, gets involved with the Gettysburg Preservation Association, okay? And he announces it on a bunch of shows. So this is really helpful to them to acquire property. This is the article that probably, he's not in this one, this is from 1958. This was an incredibly powerful article in this town for probably 5 or 10 years after this. Parade magazine, as you know, was an insert in the Sunday papers across America. And so they come out with an article called The New Battle of Gettysburg. It's all about development. It's all about stuff being built on the battlefield. So you can see this interest in preservation's building, and you can see why would the local people here want to pick Charlie Weaver, Cliff Arquette, to be their spokesperson? It's because you got a national audience for this. This is the whole thing. This is really, really key to, I think, a whole lot of stuff going on here. Here's some of the photographs. We'll just run through quickly. Tim Smith can tell us about a bunch of them. So here's Cole Park in the upper right. Okay, all those homes are about to be built in '58. All right, it's all behind Steinway. So all those houses back there, Cole Park, that's there. The Home Sweet Home Hotel, right over here. Shields Museum, they're all on here. A junkyard, and Tim, you know, what was that junkyard? Do we know where that was?
The Bullock and McDuffer Golf Course was the junkyard.
Okay.
It's empty now, and it's on Baltimore Pike near Coltsville.
Okay. So this is the thing, is that
Krause's junkyard.
and see why they're focusing on this in '59, right? So I was lucky to get an original copy of this from England. Is where it came from. So, okay, here's one of the deeds. I've got the actual sales card, I guess you could call it, in the display case here. We're going to talk about Leroy Smith, who was another incredibly important person in this town, particularly from the last half of the 20th century. He claimed that Charlie actually probably raised close to $200,000 with his efforts alone. I think conservatively, you can say at least $100,000. They announced this by a square foot of the battlefield late in '59. And of course, he announces is on the Jack Carr show. He's got the figures, by a square foot, he's got the signs, he's got all that stuff. So what happens over at their headquarters over on York was it? The headquarters back then, way back when, '59, where they were, I guess on York Road?
For who?
Battlefield Preservation.
I think they were out at Harrisburg at that time.
Oh, they were still, okay. There were so many letters that came in, they had to hire people to open them. There was so much money pouring in, okay? People wanted them as Christmas gifts, that's what it was. And they had to send letters out to a bunch of people because they couldn't keep up with the orders. They said, look, I guess send them a postcard, said, look, we're gonna get you one, but we don't have enough printed right now to do this.
How much per square foot, you know?
$1.
Oh.
So, $1. So, who else contributed, by the way? This is interesting. The Rosensteels had their milk wagon, right? Was it a milk wagon or a wagon in there with little milk jars in it? And you would donate money by state and put a little cash in there. Those went into this. And Parade Magazine, I guess they basically threw this article out there, which was so terrible, in that sense. They said, we feel an obligation, we'll help pay for it too. So it was not just Charlie, it was other people who were donating at the time. What was the first piece of property they eventually bought? It's the property over there. This is a upper view looking toward Devil's Den. It's up on the left there. This is, to me, it's probably exactly the 55 acres they bought, which is a farm, the Wolf Farm. The other big one, it was up on Mummersburg Road, if I'm pronouncing it right, the Meals Track. And that was the second one that they purchased. Now, I did find out, again, thank goodness for newspapers.com, they didn't quite raise all the money quickly enough. So they eventually, fortunately, the people selling it held off until 1965, and they're actually able to pay the bills off from, I guess, both of these, basically. But again, it's like, there was, and I can imagine all those flat lands where Stuckey's was, stuff like that, those are all prime places to put houses and other things. So he played a big role with that. Again, he's made the head of the finance committee. They originally had 700 acres they wanted to preserve, and they wanted to raise back then at $1 million. And I don't think they ever got that far, and they certainly didn't get 700 acres, but they tried, And what's ironic about it is that the Gettysburg Travel Council did not like them doing this, okay? And there's a picture, I have a slide, it's probably from the early 60s. It was down in the train station there, downtown. And again, thinking about this, you'll see Leroy coming up here in a minute. Leroy was the head of the Travel Council for several years, and he's, working with Charlie Weaver here to sort of, to bring money in and bring development in. So it was this, and it still, as you know, it still continues to this day. Tim can tell you probably a lot about that, about the sort of this balance between preservation and development, right? That's what this is all about. Ohio played a big role in this in the early years. This particular bank, now why they only gave $100, I don't know, but they were a bank, they thought they could give a little more, but they went ahead and donated to it as well. This is an interesting one. So Charlie, Cliff was on the road a lot, promoting, his character, and people invited him. This particular one is in Woodbury, New Jersey. He opened up a car dealership there. They built him a little Mount Ida shack in the dealership. He's with all the ladies. Okay, he was a ladies' man, yes. Okay, there he is in the car. I don't know if they gave him the car or not, but I think he's holding a set of keys there, Mr. Lester, which my cousin was in Tom's River. There's still a Lester auto dealership there now, and I'm sure it's the same family, I guess. But this is the important one I want to show you here, inside. What do you see over here behind this young lady, signing his mama's book to this young lady? Look behind him, what do you see there? There's the Gettysburg Preservation Battlefield Please Donate sign, okay? So he was out on the road marketing Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation and things. He's featured in both Look and Life, pretty much close together. This was the Look magazine. This one, the archives of the photographs that were taken exist in the Library of Congress. I was not able to get down there before the talk to actually see the rest of them. Some of them are online. They're reproduced by people, showing him on the battlefield, but there's about, again, I think about 100 photographs in that collection. This actually might be, and this is kind of a crazy thing here maybe, but this might be the most important photograph that I'm going to show you today. Does anybody know who the guy is on the right? It's a fellow by the name of Bruce Catton. So Bruce Catton was probably the premier Civil War scholar, author, leading up to the centennial, A lot of other people we know today didn't really exist back then. Catton was the guy that sold the Civil War on America, basically, like, this is important, we need to know about it. He wrote children's books. Think about this. The two of them are on the battlefield, probably, this thing was published in May, so this is probably like February when they actually took the photographs. They got Charlie's figures out there on the battlefield. Here's the biggest scholar in America talking to this comedian with these figures on the battlefield. And I tell you why. I think Bruce Catton understood the power of Charlie Weaver in bringing people here. That's why I think he saw the value in that. Because they don't normally go together. You wouldn't think of these two people in the same room all the time, right? So there is up on the round top up there, and Tim could probably tell where this one was. Tell where this one was taken.
East Cemetery Hill.
So they're all Cemetery Hill. This one here probably. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. There you go. And again, the Library of Congress holds these negatives now, and we might see something new. They mentioned there's photographs of the workmen in this building. After I thought about it, the workmen, as you'll see a picture, I think it was Charlie, Cliff Arquette himself, working on his figures. I think that's what they were talking about. But it's only what's online that I can access. Okay, so he's featured in, I'm sorry this is cut off here, he's featured in Life magazine, like on August 10th, 59, so they're fairly close together, okay? This is where we are right now, this is the core of this museum, are the figures in this sort of panel with look-through views, and each of those are rotating, okay? And they've got a sign above, it's cut off here, but the sign above explains who it is, what it is, and that kind of thing. And of course, as Gettysburg is one of the most famous places for souvenirs, pretty much July 5th, 1863, we start with souvenirs here. So everybody does souvenirs. So there's some up in the case, please later on take a look at them. The Toby mugs were really big. I have a small one here with me today. He actually, and again, I can't prove it. It's in the newspaper, just like the internet. Anything's in the internet is completely true, right? So I can't prove it, but he invented a prosthetic mask for people to wear that was thin enough that you could still get some facial features through it, like from the person underneath the mask. So he actually sold these masks here of him as a Charlie Weaver, right? And I've never seen one. I don't know how many were made. I have no idea, but he had that. So this is, again, I jumped ahead already with museums open, but we didn't quite get there. Now, what's important for people today is that, there's a thing called eBay, we know, right? And so eBay provides a lot of opportunities for people from across the country to get specific things that they're looking for, right? And so, of course, I ended up with him, I've got about 25 wax figures in my house, in my office. They stay there. My wife won't let them out, okay? So, should I tell you a funny story? So we live in Northwest Bergen, so it was about 7-8 years ago, pretty bad snowstorm. A friend of mine, I'm in the fireman with, a friend of mine, he and his wife and their son owned the landscaping business, and they did snow plowing in the winter. So she texted my wife and said, hey, look, I'm coming, I got to use your bathroom, can I come in? So sure. So I went out, I shoveled the sidewalk, or the walkway up to the front of our house so she could actually get in. And so she goes in, and I'm outside, and she comes in the house, stamps her feet, and my wife says, oh, it's a second door on the right, okay? And my mom is in another room. She's saying, no, it's a third door, right? Well, she doesn't hear my mom. She goes to the second door on the right. It's dark in there. All she sees this is the first guy she sees, okay? She screams and slams the door. And you can imagine what she said, okay? She had no idea she's going to go into a room full of wax figures, okay? So on eBay, I've been following Charlie Cliff Arquette for a while now, and I ended up coming up with this archive about 8 or 10 months ago. And it's a woman in Oregon I bought it from. And of course I asked her, like, where did you get this from? And she said, I got it from a woman who lived in California, moved to Oregon. And at the end of the program, I'll explain who I think this was, why it ended up coming through this route here. But what's most important about this is a spring of 1960 narrative, handwritten narrative from Charlie or Cliff Arquette about what's going on here and all his business involvements and what's going to happen. I think this is going to be an interesting one for you folks that never happened, but we'll talk about here in a second. So it's his narrative. This archive included the script that we'll see here for the Gettysburg Battlefield tour bus. Cliff is the guy who produced it. Cliff is the guy who had it recorded by Decca Records in Los Angeles, the whole bit. So anyway, this group came in one. I bought a set that photographs in a car dealership. He must have kept that for the rest of his life because that was part of that collection. I didn't get some of the artwork he did. He had a bunch of cartoon artwork, which I wasn't able to get. But this, to us, is the most important because it tells us a big story, again, what was going on. Okay, some key players here that we're going to talk about, 3 of them. The first one is Leroy Smith, or Ellie Smith, people call them apparently. I think again, I live in North Jersey, but I've read enough about him that he was probably the most important businessman in this town in the second half of the 20th century. He had his hands in just about everything here. And I see him as like a real visionary, to tell you the truth. He envisioned what this could be. It wasn't just that. He started off as a newspaper distributor. He bought Buell's, is that the way you pronounce it? Bowles? Okay. He bought that company. So by buying the souvenir business of all the maps, he then put his name on it and built it from there. He gets into the souvenir business with that company. He creates Civil War Times, which becomes Civil War Times Illustrated, which I guess lasted until last spring, right? It was the last issue that they produced. But it's remarkable that he had, and it was just a tiny piece of what Leroy Smith did. His first attraction was actually the Wills House. And he bought that. He basically created a museum out of it. And, he was a philanthropic guy. It turns out that years later, that he ended up donating that to the Eisenhower Society at the college. And then the college, of course, turned around and he knew they were going to donate it to the National Park Service. But he's the guy that, to some extent, if you want to say saves the building, sort of makes it more of a tourist attraction, basically, for the future. That's his first thing. Next fellow is William Eyre. There you go, okay? So his dad, right? He was pretty much a hotel guy, I would say. And later with some tour, you'll see him involved with tour stuff, but he was very much involved with that. He's probably of course, he was one of the partners on the Howard Johnson's Motel on Steinway, but of course he's probably most famous for the Holiday, and that was sort of his thing for several years. And Leroy ended up buying it from him later on. So he's a player here. And Tom Metz, that's the third person, I think that's a key person here in the early days. He ends up working for Leroy in the news agency, and then as time goes on, he sort of rises up through the organization, but he's an early investor with Leroy, so he's really got his hands directly involved with it, but Leroy sort of turns over a lot of the businesses to him. What's the neighborhood look like in 59? We're building up to opening this museum, okay? These are all semi-close pictures to that period. There's the whole presence, opens up, we'll see in a minute, several years earlier actually. Of course, the Jenny Wade house is here. The original cyclorama in Gettysburg is across the street. There's we are right now, right? Here we are right here. Here's the cyclorama. It was now the parking lot. And the Dutch cupboard here is here too. That's now Rita's Ice, Italian ice facility. This is an interesting picture. This I got also again on eBay. This is a transparency from the New York Mirror newspaper from either 58 or 59. It's 2 children standing in front of the painting while it's still on Baltimore Street, across the street here. But what I'm pointing out to you is that you can see up here where it was cut off and it's hanging here, and there's spotlights up there. So that's how it was in 1960, is that it's not anything like it is today, right? I saw Colleen over at the Antique Center. She and her husband were very much involved with the cyclorama, the new, where it is now. But this was basically hung in that circular building with spotlights on it, and I thought this was kind of interesting to show what it looked back then. So what do we get? We get a company called National Heritage Associates. This is the company that does a lot of stuff for as far as the attractions go for about 5 or 6 years. And who are the people in it? Leroy, William Eyre, his dad, and Tom Metz, and Cliff Arquette is a silent partner. He invests $25,000 in this company, okay? He's not on any, you won't read his name anywhere. The only place you see it is on those yellow pages I just showed you. He put that down there. I was an early investor in it. Also, of course, we'll see here in a minute, an early investor in Gettysburg Tours. They were separate companies at the time, okay? There's what they're allowed to do. Construct, improve, operate real property for business or residential purposes as owner, lessor, lessee, and to sell merchandise, wholesale to retail. So that was quite a broad brush of what they're able to do. Eventually, all these businesses sort of consolidated, most of them were consolidated with what's now Gettysburg Tours and what was then called SMG, which is, we'll talk about in a second. That's another company that Leroy created. I guess the SMG is Smith, Metz, Gettysburg, SMG. I'm thinking that's what it was, because Tom Metz was involved with that. And of course, the first thing they did with their money was actually buy the Jenny Wade house. However, what they actually got involved with is this place. Anybody know where that is? It's a map. It's a place called Freedom Land. It's now Co-op City in the Bronx, New York, okay? It was going to be the Disneyland of the East Coast. And so National Heritage, with Charlie Cliff, is asked to be a participant, basically a tenant in that park at the Civil War battle reenactment thing that they have, right? And so, yes, they get involved in June. The place opens in 1960. In those yellow pages, Charlie says they were not pleased the way that thing was operated, and he never signed a contract with them because he was afraid, because they kept, and I didn't put all the details down, but they kept coming back for money, and he's like, this is not a well-operated park. And if you read about Freedom Land, it only lasted about 6 years. And one of the big complaints was it wasn't operated very well. It had a lot of good ideas, a lot of good talent there, but the overall management was not very good. So, but we did have them there, and so they did invest, at least, I don't know when their investment ended, when they pulled out. You'll see here another next slide, you'll see some important stuff. That was the ride, if you want to call it that was associated with Freedom Land. You were basically a war correspondent riding in a horse-drawn wagon through these battle scenes with all these figures, these stationary and moving figures. You're going through there. There's Cliff on top of Traveler. Okay, this is supposed to be Appomattox, okay? And there's Cliff at the, basically in front of the building with a Civil War soldier there, okay? And these came from the Freedom Land folks. He was able to get these 2 pictures for me. He opened a museum there. It's not unlike what we're sitting here right now. Here it is. Charlie Lever's Civil War Museum in Freedom Land, okay? His figures were there, not this guy, not this particular guy, but some of his soldiers were there. He had relics that he brought with him there, and it was in this building here, right here. There was basically a tent with a taut canvas cover over it in which they had a wax museum in there, and it's kind of cut off here, but here's a standing Charlie Weaver figure with this young girl. She lent me the photograph. Her father was the head of park maintenance for Freedom Land. So that's her picture with the Charlie Weaver figure there. I don't know how long it lasted. All I know is that he was not happy in the spring of '60. He was not happy the way it was operating. Maybe things changed, I don't know. But in any case, that was National Heritage actually first operation. The first building was Jenny Wade. Okay, here's Jenny Wade, they buy it. It's an existing museum that was there already, tons of artifacts, relics and things. It's more focused on perhaps on the relics than the way it is set up now, like Christina's has it now, is more of what the house looked like when Jenny was there. Everything for Charlie and Cliff Arquette was modern technology. He was not a traditionalist. He wanted to have this a little bit more interesting, so he suggested, I guess, to Leroy, they have the infamous talking walls in there. That's one of the old panels that's in there now, speakers in there. The walls would talk to you, tell you the story. There were, again, wax figures ended up in there. They're not there anymore, but that's kind of how I knew about this, is some of the people we'll see a little bit later on. And so, again, that's the first thing they purchased. This is a thumbnail off of the Adams County Historical Society. Here's the Holiday Inn. This is probably Wes's father's probably premier desire here is to get this hotel built here. There's the edge of Jenny Wade right there, okay? Here it is, there's the Dutch
That's from
cupboard.
Thelma Bullock's porch. You know, Thelma Bullock.
Yeah, and then she took all these. This is just one of many she took from her porch. She's on the street behind, right? Behind it, right? What's it called?
Hillside?
Hillside? Okay. It's a little, it's like if you're in a parking lot behind the the 1863, and it's like set up here. So there's a lot of excavation work that went on there to create this base for this hotel, which, by the way, this is the very first multi-story Holiday Inn in the country, was right here. Okay, they did not have any, they may have had 2-story, but this is, I think, 5. So this is the first one, and what did I find in the papers of Cliff's notes? Flights to Memphis, that's where Holiday Inn is based. They went down to make the argument, hey, I'm sure what they're going to say is, we got this primo spot, as Charlie called it, the hottest intersection in town. He said that specifically, so this is the hottest intersection in town. They got this footprint for this building. I can't do a normal Holiday Inn, I need something taller. And I guess they coalesced and they let him put the trademark Holiday Inn name on it. But I found his notes about his flights to Memphis, and the only reason I would think he would go there, because that's where Holiday Inn was, and he was, again, an active participant in National Heritage in the early days. Again, bad photo of the opening of the Hall of Presidents, which eventually came under Gettysburg Tours. They opened in '57 and they closed and had the auction of the materials back in 2017. Here's a line, just like all the museums when they opened, there's a line. And the other thing, and Christina can correct me, or maybe Tim, that a lot of these museums are always open to Gettysburg residents for free. They were able to just, if they were, I guess, able to show their driver's license or something. No? Okay.
Used to be.
They used to be, yeah. And I'm not now, I'm saying, but back then, a lot of them, they say, you can come in for free. I think this is a great shot. This sort of connects this slide here, because on the right, here's the original Holiday Inn sign, which everybody remembers, right? And here's the double-decker bus, and they're riding by, and it's about 64, 65 that sort of, Wes's dad, William, goes off to sort of, I think, really focus just on the hotels, and Tom Metz and Leroy go in a different direction, more for the attractions, and this is, the actual, his dad William Eyre owned the name National Heritage when I guess it was him that dissolved it in June of 1982. That's when that company went away. But it was incredibly important right before the centennial, because that's when all this stuff is happening. Now, this is the attractions that never got built. Now, this is a Leroy Smith aerial photograph, okay? Now, if you look over here, here's the cyclorama. We're right here. Here's the cyclorama. Here's Gettysburg High School over here. I'm taking a guess. In his notes, he says, we have 50 acres to build a couple attractions on. And he says it's only a couple blocks from the Jenny Wade house. So the only place I could figure is right there, right? Because that's where at that time, I imagine this was all still private property. So what were they going to build? Well, they were going to build a train ride based upon 2 Gettysburg boys who go to war, one for the Confederacy, one for the Union. They're going to ride through the woods, and there will be scenes from different battles through the woods. They were going to have everything enclosed, the air-conditioned electric trains, again, total stereo in the train, so the Park Service would accept it. They apparently met with the Park Service to talk about this with them. There wouldn't be any noise coming out of it for the most part. With that, and they're going to build a 3,000 seats amphitheater in the woods where they're going to produce a program called The Unfurled Flag, which Charlie was going to write. Cliff was going to write that. And again, Charlie thinking ahead, it was all a lip sync program, right? So that people would be able to, they would be able to interchange actors and not worry about Frank is sick tonight, geez, he's George Meade, we can't have him tonight, or whatever. They had it all set up so that the actors could just step in and mouth the parts, and that would be it. Of course, it never got built, okay? But
Is that what Giant is?
No, that's the junior high school.
oh, this is junior high school here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, junior high school. But this is the only place I could figure it would be, because everything going this way is battlefield property for the most part. 50 acres is pretty big. So I'm guessing that's where it was. And it kind of made sense because it's behind what they're doing already, right? So anyway, that was the thing that nobody, probably until I read this, nobody knew about it. It's not in any newspaper, it's not anywhere, but it's in his notes. Okay, here's his bus that he gets involved with. On April 6, 59, he, William Ayer, Tom Metz, and again, Charlie is a silent partner, are involved with the buses. In his notes, he goes, we bought 3 buses, da-da-da. And of course, the most important thing is that he's the guy, the actual script is up here. I'll show you in a second. The actual script's here in the case. He wrote the entire thing, produced the entire hour-and-a-half program, and had it recorded at Decca Records in Los Angeles with his friends actors. Hugh Downs, okay, Massey, the famed Lincoln actor, basically, okay, Walter Massey.
Raymond.
Raymond.
Oh, I'm sorry, Raymond, sorry, thank you. Raymond Massey. And Bruce Catton has a role in this, too. We'll see her in a second. Now, before we get on to showing you that, let me just tell you that. Can you imagine, we've got battlefield tour guides for many decades at this point. We've got existing taxi companies and bus companies running people into the battlefield. They decide, oh, you go in my car like they do today, right, where they take a small bus in. That's happening. Can you imagine these 4 guys come in and say, you know what, we're not going to do it that way anymore. We're going to have air-conditioned buses with stereophonic sound in them, with live effects of like hearing battle and people screaming, all this kind of stuff going on as we go through the battlefield. This was like, this is 1959. It's like, this is like 21st century stuff. Oh my God, can we do that? Well, guess what happened? They got big pushback from Wolf Taxi and a bunch of others in town here. They did not want that to happen. So they ended up having to go to Harrisburg to get a permit to do this. But listen, they were smart enough, they went to the Park Service first. We're going to do something different. You okay with that? And they were okay with it. I'm sure Cliff Arquette played a role here because he's famous and people know him, and he probably was able to persuade the Park Service to let these 3 Mercedes-Benz buses onto the battlefield with no licensed battlefield guide inside, okay? So it was a big deal back then. This is what I was telling to Tim earlier. This is the script. Take a look at this. End Catton. That's his narration over here, okay? He's playing a role in this thing, okay? There are probably other people who I don't know who they are, but like I said, Charlie's very clear about it. He picked people that have radio voices. That's what he wanted, okay? And so you can see, this is just a page out of the script. He's got the sound effects over here, and he's got the narrative over here. So he's a professional performer. He knows exactly, he wrote this whole thing, right? He wrote this whole thing. He spent $6,400 of his own money to have it recorded. I mean, that's in addition to the time he spent actually writing this thing. But I'm sure he loved it. He's sitting upstairs writing. This is where it was written, right here. So, that's the cover of it. You can't really read it. It's a little bit too dark. I mentioned here's the people. At least some of the people I know that were in this, okay? I didn't show that other page. Anyway, I have if anyone wants to see it, I could show you the timing. He literally went every inch of the actual tour path and measured it in seconds so that he coordinated that with the script, okay? So that they had a match. Because on the side over here, see the number of seconds and stuff? They had to match the tape with actually the person driving the bus here in town, basically, okay? Ingenious, really ingenious. Okay, tours, their first depot is actually over next to the Dutch cupboard now, Rita's, right? There it is. I think, and I may be wrong about this, Tim might know better, that's the same building that ends up getting moved across the street. This is before the Cyclorama that was there is torn down, and now the new building actually is there now, of course. But this was a log cabin. They liked prefabricated, Leroy liked prefabricated, that's why they did it. But there it is right there. SMG was a separate company with Leroy and with Tom Metz. And it features a bunch of dioramas, artwork, and eventually the famous film that they had there. This is a piece of artwork in the back that the building's going to be torn down in not too distant future by the Battlefield Trust. And I've talked to a few folks, including Tim. There may, if we can somehow preserve this will be good, because this building, listen, nothing compares to Electric Map, okay? Nothing compares that. It's its own category of specialness. But this is really the first real film in town to explain what's going on before the Park Service, okay? So this is kind of, I think this is, again, an important artifact to preserve because the building's going to be gone. The hotel that used to be here is gone already. This is the Kentucky Fried Chicken here. This is going to be going down, I guess, pretty soon.
Is that the buffet?
Yeah, the Pickett's Buffet, exactly. So that's exactly, we know today's Pickett's Buffet, but it was really started more museum, then it became less museum and more buffet kind of thing. So here it is, June 1st he's going to open. Again, he suggested that. Norman Rockwell suggested coming here June 1st, 1958, but it doesn't actually open until March of 59. I don't know why. Something must have happened. Maybe Charlie was too busy or something. I don't know, but it actually opened on March 1st of 59. Where is it? It's in this building here. It's the old orphanage. Most of you are aware of it. The key element of this is, of course, the issue of the famous dungeon in the building to represent the children that were tortured by Rosa Carmichael, who was the home's female administrator for several years and before she got booted out. And so Charlie kept at least that part of it as part of this museum. Here's the famous postcard view. Oh, he had to go to the wedding, right? He had to go to the wedding. Okay, Tom had to go to the wedding. He had a wedding to go to. He got me that photograph there. That's before even the signs went up on the side that their door has now in his museum up Baltimore Street. So this is a pretty early picture of them. And Cliff Arquette lived upstairs. He had a business his apartment up there. I found out that actually William Eyre was the actual purchaser. So his dad actually bought the building for $17,600 or $17,500 back in '58. Okay, Cliff didn't actually have an ownership in the building per se. His ownership was the museum with William Eyre's. Okay, they had the opening day. It was a soft opening, I guess, on Saturday, February 28th, attended by a ton of people. And basically, Arquette ran the museum displays and stuff. Ayers would maintain the building and manage the souvenir sales, so that was the agreement that they had. Here's the famous photograph, again, looking to the building. It's kind of dark here, but there they are lined up to go inside. There's the big sign there on opening day. Hundreds came in. Here's some of the figures. We have one that my cousin brought. He purchased at the auction. It's a West Point cadet. And there's a picture below it of Charlie painting that soldier. They were hand carved out of pine, and the heads were carved separately. When it opened, he had 37 on display. Apparently he had 57, but he put 37 out. And the biggest thing was the uniforms, as David Arquette mentioned. In the archive, I found several pages of the Company of Military Historians. They did narratives and plates. That's why as a kid I was so fascinated being here when George Woodbridge, who was an illustrator for Mad Magazine, my dad knew him because we were here at the Holiday Inn for a Company of Military Historians meeting, and I always thought, man, that's cool. This guy draws soldiers and he draws cartoons in Mad Magazine. I thought that was really cool. Anyway, so I mentioned that in the archive there's some from 73, that tells me that Cliff Arquette was still carving right up to the end. There's one photograph you'll see of, and actually it's in the case here too, taken in '73. Right up to the end, he was still making these. Okay, even though he's gone from Gettysburg himself as a person for well over 10 years. Here's Mike Arquette Lewis. That's David Arquette, the grandson we just saw. That's his father. He went by Mike. His formal name was Lewis. He worked for his father here in this building, basically, as his like associate, I guess. So, there's a catalog in here. All the souvenirs you see, he sold out of this building. Okay. There's a bunch of stuff. There was candy. There was a whole slew of things. He had mug. There's the Toby mug. He had a bunch of stuff, and it was sold out of this building, basically. Now, how long it went on after that, because the address you mailed to was here, was Gettysburg. So I don't know if it was kept on, at least the supplies were kept in, for years later that they still sold. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, he had a bunch. There's the first brochure, actually it's in the case here too. Like it's a fairly simple one with a simple hand-drawn map over there, okay, explaining like, what this is. And here's the second one, which is over the other side there. A little bit more formal brochure for the, again, museum. This is the upstairs photographs. These are from Look magazine. Okay, there is writing letters. Okay, he was really focused, a prolific writer. He answered everybody's letter. Ironically, I think this is probably for the second version of the museum. My dad, again being a cavalry collector, we were fortunate living in North Jersey, so he knew and was friends with the fellow who owned a place called Bannerman's Island above West Point. It's a famous military supply house that was loaded with stuff. In the late 60s, my father was up there every weekend in a motorboat with these folks going out to get stuff, and my father had a bunch of things, and he wrote a letter here to this museum asking if they were interested. I don't know what happened, if they responded or not, but anyway, he was a prolific, he did answer people's letters and stuff. So here's carving some wood. Here's smiling at the one that was sold here at the auction with holding the little mouse by its tail. That's the picture that's commonly used a lot. I think they all go back to Look magazine. That's where they all started from. They were published here. Here's the apartment upstairs. This is his apartment up there. I'm assuming he's got black curtains. I'm assuming his bedroom and stuff was on the side of this. We haven't gone upstairs to figure out if we can figure out exactly what room this is, but that's where it was all going on. You can see over here he's got his wood cutting saw over here, and he's got his nice fridge over here, probably for adult beverages and things like that. Okay. Here you are. That's that young man right there. Is that young kid right there? There he is. Okay.
Yep.
Here you are. Okay.
My sisters.
And your sister there too. Exactly. There's Cliff Arquette pointing out the exhibit when the museum opened. I mentioned the hi-fi. Again, he was so into technology. I mean, you don't think of him as technology. He hired Mr. Roby, who was the expert in hi-fi in Gettysburg, to come in and put the first stereophonic sound system in this building, again, in 1959. Okay, so it's pretty incredible. He ends up, Cliff Arquette joins the Moose Club, inducted with Leroy Smith, a bunch of the Mooses. Okay, he makes the first area code phone call from maybe this building, I don't know, to the West Coast in Gettysburg. Okay, calls his mother up in San Francisco using the 3-digit area code way back when, 1960. Now I got did have the right address, 440. If you want to buy it, it's up for sale right now. I think his parents owned the building originally. Okay,
Yes, they did.
Okay, and they sold it to Cliff Arquette, right? And he had it for 8 months or 10 months, and then he, of course, we'll see here in a second, he goes back to California. That house is for sale right now, and my cousin and I drove by, and I thought, should we go and ask, was there anything left behind? I mean, that building had been about 60-some years ago, but who knows, maybe Cliff put something in the attic and never took it out, I don't know. Anyway, 440 Queen Street, okay? He bought it on March 1st of '61. So Cliff was intending, I think, on staying here. You don't buy a house if you don't think you're going to stay, I would think, right? But then what happens? January of '62, they dissolved their relationship, okay? There's various versions of this. If you read what his son Louis, AKA Mike, said, Charlie had gotten a position on the Roy Rogers show in LA. We know that the Jack Parr show didn't last much longer into '62. So Cliff might have seen their handwriting on the wall, hey, I need a better, decent, again, source of income here. So I got to leave town. I think that's what happened. It's also possible that he may have ended up in some kind of situation with your parents. I don't know. Because your parents filed a claim for $1,500. Now, I don't know, and it's on Queen Street, so it's got to be something to do with the house. I don't know why. There may be family lore about it. You might know more about it than I do, but I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure why. Because Cliff, of course, eventually does come back again, and I'm sure that that his father and Cliff were back together again a few years later. So anyway, he goes to California, and again, he goes on to the Roy Rogers show. He's a regular on there, so he keeps his presence on television. He sold the house in September '62, and that answers that. He was on the move. There's a photo of him in his famous car, and if you heard David Arquette say, he owns that car now. He used to take it to a lot of events and stuff and drive it around and things, like a parade car or something, right? What does Cliff Arquette do after this? He opens another museum in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. He's very close to the clarinetist, and I mentioned Pete Fountain up here. He's very close to Pete Fountain. I guess, again, it's the cluster of musicians that he really knew pretty well. And so it doesn't last that long, maybe a year or two. I can't figure out when it closed. The Adams County Historical Society, somewhere in their archives, we believe they actually have a brochure from that. That's the actual invitation for the day it opened. That's up here in the case. So he did have another museum. He did mention in the Los Angeles paper that he was thinking of opening Charlie Weaver's Museum in Los Angeles, near Disneyland, near Knott's Berry Farm, near all that. So what happens to this building for a few years? It becomes Heritage Hall. This is where the dioramas show up then. I don't believe the dioramas were here when Cliff was here. The dioramas are put in here to basically take up space because Charlie's not here anymore, right? So we have the dioramas in here, and they called it that for a few years. It's still under National Heritage Association ownership. There's the same building, right? But now it's a home for the dioramas primarily, and for a reenactor group that's based out of here. They did nightly like taps and stuff like that, retreat ceremonies at night here at this building. Okay? Leroy Smith buys this building from his parents in 1965 for $30,000, and Leroy Smith then proceeds to update the building to add this colonnade on front, which has been removed since now, after the museum closed. And this museum had several names for the period up to the time of Cliff Arquette's death. It was the Charlie Weaver Theme Museum, called Charlie Weaver's Museum of the Civil War. It was Charlie Weaver's American Museum of the Civil War, and it was Charlie Weaver's Showcase of the Civil War. Those words go in and out for a while, okay? And this one is just simply American Museum of the Civil War. There's Leroy again. It's the only photo I have of them with one of the colonnades out front. They incorporated this business on May 12th, the day after it actually opened, okay? And so off they go. Leroy sans beard over here. All I can imagine is that Leroy, well, I know this for a fact, because Christina, we have the letter that Charlie Weaver, Cliff Arquette wrote to Leroy. They were like that. They were very close. And I can see how Leroy said, you know what, we need to bring him back here. He's still pretty famous. We like the museum. Let's do a new version of it. Let's add on to the building. Let's do a bunch of other things. So that's what happened. This came with that archive. I'm figuring this is from that day because these flowers are common in some of the other photographs when they opened the museum, right at the front door here. Okay. Here's Walter Lane. That's the famous picture. But I want to point out this to you. See these striped pants here? There's a little bit of stripes here. If you see my red arrow goes down here, striped pants right there, okay? We're going to see that in a second here. He put in a series of vignettes with famous people. Tennessee Ernie Ford, Jonathan Winters, this is the one I'm going to show you here in a second. Jonathan Winters lives with Charlie in Waldorf, New Jersey now. I bought that figure too, okay? He's a Zouave. He lives in that same room where the lady screamed, okay? So he had a lot of people now. This is for today, for this weekend. Here's all the apple blossom queens here, okay? This is Apple Weekend. Here they all are, okay? With Charlie. He liked the ladies, of course, and so here's all the young ladies here with him at the opening night of the museum. Here is in the backyard, and he created this sort of Civil War fort, which, you know, it kind of sort in a way makes sense, but the fort itself, that's more, we think of that for Indian wars and things like that, but listen, it worked here. Notice these figures. Did you see any figures before, like when Charlie was on Traveler and he was sitting up at the table up top there? Yes, these are the Freedom Land figures. They're fiberglass and they moved here. And those are the ones that were sold at auction. This is the back, this is right here, right outside these doors. You would go through the dioramas through the outside. There's a little sign right here that you went into various rooms to see the dioramas. Okay, this is similar to the one we looked at yesterday. Tim and I looked at one yesterday. This walks you through the museum, okay? I'll just tell you quickly. The first thing you see is the replica of Gettysburg appeared 63. That's now at the Drummer Boy, okay? That's over in the back room of the Drummer Boy. That's the Gettysburg diorama that was in there. There's a scene with Skelly and Jenny Wade. Charlie's friends and a famous pea picker. That's Tennessee Ernie Ford. That was his nickname, a pea picker, basically. Rifles, cartridges and stuff from the Civil War. Famous pictures, small figures that Charles Caldwell's mentioned back then. He comes here pretty early. Charlie, as he portrays himself, he looked as if he looked at his apartment. That's this figure right here. That's what they're talking about right here. Back side of it, again, more figures, 2 large oil paintings. He did a bunch of oil paintings of Lee and other people. We don't know where those are now. And then a narrative about Lincoln. You end up with the Lincoln Room, and Tom Metz actually at some point had the Lincoln statue, which has an own interesting history. It ended up going to Plymouth, Massachusetts. And it's believed that the action may have been, what's his name, the sculptor. We have a sculptor here that sculpted the Lincoln Memorial figure of Lincoln. This may have been one of the models for it. Was right in this museum here. Okay, there's the famous dungeon that we talked about, right, with the little child down there. Rosa Carmichael tortures the kids. People throw money down there, and here's Leroy basically donating money to various charities and stuff. Okay, there's kind of dark here. There's Tennessee Ernie Ford. Here's Jonathan Winters. You can't really make it out here, but there, actually, his pants, that's the stripes. So they're staying in front of that exhibit, taking that photograph. Here's something interesting. This is what he did for all the figures. This one is a Continental Infantryman, Continental Revolution Infantryman. That was going to be Mike. His son was going to be the model for the figure. Jack Parr was his. This is his hand-drawn layout of all these figures. Here is Zouave and Nurse. There's Zouave and Nurse, okay? So he was thinking about all these different scenes, and here's this, again, audio stereo system. Here's your tape machines right back there, okay? This picture is in the case here. This is one I got on eBay several years ago. I think it's the same figure because his arm is down, but notice what they're doing. They're sitting on the desk. Remember Jack Parr and him were reading a letter, sitting on the desk? That's why they simulated that. Here's the 2 grandchildren here, Rosanna Arquette and Richmond here in the museum. Here's this guy right here. Here's when he became a brigadier general in the Confederate High Command in July 4th of '67. That was the picture was taken of his grandchildren the same day. Within a week, he's on up in Plymouth, Massachusetts, opening the Plymouth Wax Museum up there. And, oh shoot, you really can't see it here, but I'll bend this down for a second. Who do you think is the guy on the left in the upper picture? If you say Leroy Smith, you're right, that's who it is. He's in the famous scene, the painting of going to church in Plymouth. He was the lead figure in that. That's the funny thing about wax museums. That's exactly that. They put their friends and themselves in it, okay? Becomes a Soldiers National Museum in 77. That's about the time it changes. Charlie died in 74. So they went almost back to, almost identical name was when he had it in 59. So they went back to that. A couple of things about it was hit. The front facade was hit in 81, took a piece of it down. Here's the auction. There's my cousin with the horse inside the Confederate flag. There's Charlie. That's why he's holding cards here. He's not holding a figure anymore. He was a Confederate soldier in the walk-through wax museum when it closed. Okay, so that's where that came from. Here's some other artifacts. Oh boy, here's your fiberglass people from Freedom Land. Okay, because they were outdoors. That's what they had. Okay. A couple of things. Streets of 63. They had a role, and again, Charlie by extension had a role here with this, with Leroy Smith. Streets of 63 became, in 78 became the old Gettysburg, that they crossed over the names a lot. Here is the Wax Museum aficionado, the man who owned the largest set of wax museums in the country, who created all of them. His name was Earl Dorfman. They're still a company that still exists in Baltimore today. That's most of the figures I have in my collection are from him. That's him because he put himself in every museum. He was a guy at the Marymount in Plymouth with a rising chest. He always had at least one rising chest guy. I ended up buying Charles Sumner over here at the Civil War Wax Museum, which was one of the few rising chest guys. So I have him, he lives in Waldwick too. But he would put himself in either as a participant in battle or somewhere he was in. It was like Alfred Hitchcock, sort of, that kind of thing. Okay. Oh no, guess what was going to be built right here? The observation tower. Its first location was here because Leroy Smith was part of the original company until the Park Service must have told him, look, it's not a good idea to do this, okay? And it's in the newspaper. They say, okay, he resigned from the corporation, and the opportunity to build at 777 actually didn't ever happen. But I want to believe that because there's buildings here, this is where they're really thinking it was going to be. Because, of course, it would next go over to John Street, behind Pickett's Buffet, back in that corner over there. Then no, it didn't go there in Cole Park, and then it ended up over here, back over on Waltham Street. So I want to believe that that's why they drew it that way. I don't know, but I can't guarantee it. There was a balloon here too. I don't know, no one ever heard of it. There was a balloon, a Civil War balloon that went up and down, I guess in the back. Yeah. Maybe you could ride on it, I don't know. But a big windstorm came by and blew it away, and I guess they never saw it again. And was it 19?
I thought it was the Intrepid.
The what?
It was the Intrepid.
It was Intrepid, right? It was like a 1/3 size or something?
Yeah, it was the Civil War hot air balloon, the Intrepid, and it was right here in this courtyard for a while.
Okay, and it went up and down, or?
I don't remember going up and
down. Oh, okay, maybe just stayed stationary, okay, all right. Charlie's probably big screen was this movie. The two people on here are friends of his. They're investors with him with the Chuckles Greeting Card Company. The Chuckles Greeting Card Company, which I didn't really talk about in bringing the stuff with me. Charlie had a greeting card company for about 20 years. It went on even after he died, based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's on Hollywood Squares from 65 to 74. So the key thing about him is that you notice he's a little bit less, he's much thinner now. Why? Because in 72, he has a heart attack and weeks later has a stroke. He's driving on the highway, on the one highway in LA. He feels a heart attack coming. He pulls off his policeman right there. They get him to the hospital. They do surgery on him. And then a few weeks later, he ends up having a stroke. That really hurt him a lot. And so he was off the show for quite a while. And when he does come back, he's lost over 100 pounds. Okay? And so he comes back. He gets an apartment in Burbank near the studio because he doesn't have to go that far. He ends up hiring a couple male nurses to help him get there and back and stuff. But I'll tell you, here he is. This photograph is dated 1973. So I got to believe he's still making these figures in LA now. And the reason I show this one is because That's the one that was in the video you saw with David Arquette. It's hanging on his wall now, okay? And so he's still in Hollywood Squares. The last photograph that I know of him is he's the best man for Devon William and his then new wife Cicely Johnston, Sanford and Son. Sanford and Son, the son of Sanford, the son part of Sanford and Son, that's him in the thing. All I can figure, he's in the same cluster of comedians and stuff. That's how they probably knew each other. He was the best man. He's at his wedding on May 3rd. He dies on September 23rd of a heart attack. So what's his legacy here? Well, I mean, this is the big one probably, is that he was the image of battlefield preservation for the rest of the country, that they saw him on television talking about Gettysburg. And so here's the message I have for the Battlefield Trust and for the Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation. There's one young lady who grew up in Pennsylvania. Her name is Taylor Swift. Can you imagine if Taylor Swift put one tweet out that says, "Help the Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation"? Can you imagine the money that will pour into this town? All she has to do is move somewhere and everybody watches it, right? So that's the assignment for our friends at Battlefield Trust. Gary Edelman, he's got to get a hold of Taylor Swift and say, please, can you just do one tweet? Please send money to here, okay? And then you buy your 700 acres, okay? And the other thing is that he did really, again, create this, along with Leroy Smith, this foundation for the tourism part of town, I think, again, before the centennial, which still exists today. I mean, now, of course, it's ghost tours, but over the years it changes. But the point is that they helped build, Leroy Smith and him particularly, helped build this town into something that people still want to come here. I feel that way. Listen, I've been the president of several historical societies. I get historic preservation, but I also understand you want to have things for people to do when they come. And I know there's a lot of people upset with the Lincoln Lynx that's going up in Steinway, right? But you know what, at the end of the day, if, like, my cousin and I were eating breakfast this morning, and there was 3 people with unusual clothing on, with unusual colored hair, and I asked the girls, "Are you here for the ghost tours?" "Oh, yes, we are." And I listened to their conversation. They were at a table next to us, and they were all about, they were there for the ghost tours, but they went down the list. I'm listening to them. Devil's Den, we want to see this, we want to see. So the point of it is that they have to work together, and I think most people accept that, but it's been a battle for a very long time, for decades. It's not something new. This is something, if you go back to the 50s, they're talking about it. We can't develop this, can't develop that. But I think the balance is here, really, honestly. And so, anyway, I want to thank you all. There he is at that car dealership. I thought that was kind of a fun picture to end with. So there it is. There's the story of Cliff Arquette, Charlie Weaver, this building, what he did, and what have you. So anyway, thank you. It was an hour and a half, probably.
6:30.
It's 6:30 already? No, it's an hour and a half, all right. So my parking meter went up, I'm sorry, you get a ticket out front, so.
That's how we make our money in town.
I know you do. I know you do. So, anyway, any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
If you want to see what Freedom Land looked like in the Bronx,
Yes.
it was part of an episode of the Naked City
Oh, really?
TV show.
Okay,
I think it was called Memory of a Trolley Car.
okay,
It would have been towards the end of season 3, probably about
Wow.
episode 32.
okay. Well, thank you. I didn't know that. I know that. I've come to know the guy who's like the Freedom Lane guy who got me the photographs and stuff. I should tell him that. I don't know if he knows that.
Yeah, if you Google Naked City episodes, it's towards the end of season 3, it's like episode 32, I think.
Okay.
Memory of a Trolley Car.
Thank you.
And that's filmed at Freedom Land.
Wow, I didn't know that. Didn't know that. Thank you, sir.
Glenn, he was in a couple of marriages and a couple of relationships and sued a couple of people in court. And what was he like personally?
Everything I could figure was he like he was as a comedian, he was that kind of upbeat personality. You don't see a lot. I mean, I hear things from people that, he was, maybe he had perhaps some other issues with different things and stuff, but I never saw any of that in writing, though. It was always verbally from like current people.
Sure.
So I think he was really a very personable person, and that's the reason why he was popular, I think. Kids came up to him, he didn't rush them away, he talked to them and stuff, he played the role, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, after a while, I guess he got tired of, like, if he's here in this building, when he's here up to 62, basically, he would have to put his outfit on all the time, and he probably would change in and out constantly depending upon what was going on. If some child came by, he goes, Charlie Weaver here, you know, and he would go put the outfit on. It was $300 a pop. He replaced everything except the hat. He said that the hat could never be recreated. He used it for the entire time. All the ties, the suspenders, pants, all that was that, but, you know.
Thanks.
Yeah, but I didn't mention, thank you for reminding me, I think that archive, this is my guess, this is total speculation, but I think that archive was part of his, we'll call it his estate, that Lewis, his son, didn't take. His son probably it was in California already, probably scooped up stuff that was important to him. Probably Lewis didn't want some of these things. And so I believe that the woman in California who sold it to the woman in Oregon, who sold it to another woman in Oregon, who sold it to me, I think the original woman was his girlfriend. I think that. I have somewhere, I can't find, I have a picture of him and her. I don't know when it was, it's got to be taken in the late, you know, like late 60s, early 70s. So, but I think that's how it ended up coming, this route through this. So, yes, sir.
I live up in the attic.
Yes.
I found this in one of the closets up there.
Yeah.
You're talking about hats, you know?
There you go. It could be. It could be. But yeah, he was a person, and that's why, I think that's why he was so popular. People saw him as like a family member, friendly. You don't see him yelling or screaming. He told an enormous amount of corny jokes. That was his thing. You know, some of which I was saying earlier, they were in Hollywood Squares. We couldn't even use those today, okay? There's some I could tell you right now that for mixed audiences is not a good thing. So, but yeah, I think that's why. I think he really was.
I found this at a yard sale.
You did?
The second
Printing?
I think it's second version.
Yes. Yep, there's actually, this is another thing, he signed a copy here, there's a Gettysburg book with it, and I think he must have sold these books here. I mean, he definitely sold that book here, but I think he also sold other Gettysburg guides, because why would this two books have been together, both with Charlie Weaver, Cliff Arquette's signature on it, right? Would make sense.
This is 60, so I think the other one you mentioned was before 60.
Nice. So, yeah, and so the picture of him at the opening shows him, actually, there's a picture of him at the car dealership signing one. So they were definitely sold here. They're in that catalog there too, being sold here.
Yeah.
So, yep, so thank you.
Yeah, I found this locally, you know,
Yeah.
Gettysburg, Williams Grove.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
cool.
Are we good? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
There's a house in Colt Park, right across Queen Street from where you live, Kirsten. In the basement, if it's still there, before it was remodeled,
Yes.
was a mural
Really?
that I think was painted or done by,
Possible. And what street was that?
it's, what's your street, Fairview?
Okay. It's possible. He was you could see he was a really good artist. I don't know that the Pit Boss was his artwork. I don't think it was. It's very different.
Yeah.
I think his grandson believes it might be, and maybe it was. I don't know. I can't prove it one way or the other. But you can see how talented an artist he was. So.
It was a mural of Gettysburg.
Oh, really?
It had the Howard Johnson and the Gettysburg of the 60s.
Gotcha.
It was wild.
Yeah.
But it was in the basement, as long as those people, I know they did an extensive remodel of the.
Well, that would be interesting to see that, huh?
I hope they didn't cover that.
Cover it over. Maybe it's still there.
You painted on the wall or something?
Yes, it was on the wall,
But it might be under what's there now, though.
if they knew what they had.
If they knew what they had, exactly. Thank you.
That's cool.
Those murals were in the basement. There were like 4 of them, different time periods, the Indians and and they had about the Gettysburg Motor Lodge being badmouthed by Howard Johnson. Another one, and those are out at the Gettysburg Construction Company building their entryway.
Oh, really?
Off Bigville Road.
Really?
You walk in and you can see 2 of them
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Do they have the one with a cop?
Yeah, I got a picture of that.
And like I said, his dad was a partner on the Howard Johnsons when that was built, so, yep. So, oh, yes.
So he had a lot lot of connections to the area. Do you have any connections to the college?
Not that I'm aware of. And he probably did. I mean, I left out a whole bunch of stuff where he did this for this group and this for that group. I am sure he did something. He was always the judge for children's things and stuff, and art and stuff like that. So he spent a lot of time doing a lot of things here for a very short period of time. Yes?
Some of his dioramas that were in this museum.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if they were his, they were probably brought in by, Ellie Smith later, but like the Devil's Den and the Railroad Cut, they're in the lobby at what do they call that, Patriot Point, across from Blessings now, the old Prince of Peace Museum. When you walk in the lobby there, they have some of the stuff that was in this museum. And then also at the Union Drummer Boy.
Yes.
Where they had that diorama of the town, that was done by Eugene Sickle. So if you know Eugene Sickles, he was with the fire department and a big, he did a lot.
And he's the guy that painted the stuff in America Gettysburg, or the Battlefield Theater.
Yeah, he was really talented.
Yep, and we're hoping that we'll keep that painting there, we'll see, but before the building goes down, so, but thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you all for coming, we appreciate it. There we go. So come on, take a look.